The morning sun cast long shadows across the tarmac at Dallas International Airport as Master Sergeant Jake Williams adjusted his dress uniform one final time. The crisp blue fabric bore the weight of 15 years of service, each ribbon and medal telling a story of dedication and sacrifice. Today, however, his mission was different from any he had undertaken in his military career. Inside the cargo hold of Flight 447, a flag-draped casket waited in solemn silence. Staff Sergeant Michael Torres had returned home from his final deployment, but not in the way his family had hoped. The young soldier had been killed in action 3 weeks earlier, leaving behind a wife, 2 small children, and parents who still couldn't believe their son was gone. Jake had volunteered for escort duty without hesitation. He knew Michael's family personally, having served alongside the fallen soldier's father years earlier. This wasn't just duty for Jake. It was a promise to an old friend that his son would receive the honor he deserved. The airport bustled with typical morning activity. Travelers hurried past with rolling suitcases, their minds focused on business meetings and vacation plans. Few noticed the military transport vehicle positioned near the cargo area, or the small group of honor guards preparing for the transfer ceremony. Airport Operations Manager Sarah Chen received the notification on her computer screen as she sipped her morning coffee. Military escort arriving Gate 7 cargo transfer at 0900 hours. She had handled these situations before, and each one affected her deeply. Sarah had lost her own brother in military service 5 years ago, and she understood the profound responsibility that came with these moments. The airline crew worked efficiently to prepare for the casket transfer. Captain Robert Hayes, a Vietnam veteran himself, had requested to personally oversee the operation. He stood beside the aircraft, his weathered face reflecting the gravity of the moment. The crew moved with practiced precision, but their usual chatter was replaced by respectful silence. Jake checked his watch as he walked toward the aircraft. The family would arrive at the airport in 2 hours for the connecting flight to the soldier's hometown. Everything had to be perfect. There could be no delays, no complications, and no dishonor to the sacrifice this young man had made. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of jet fuel and the distant hum of aircraft engines. Other flights continued their regular schedules, passengers boarding and departing while life moved forward around them. But for Jake and the small group gathered near the cargo hold, time seemed suspended in this moment of profound respect. As the cargo doors opened, revealing the flag-draped casket, Jake felt the familiar tightness in his chest that came with these ceremonies. He had escorted 17 fallen soldiers home during his career, and each one left an indelible mark on his soul. This wasn't just another duty, it was a sacred trust. The airport ground crew, typically focused on efficiency and speed, moved with unusual care and deliberation. Even the most seasoned workers understood they were in the presence of something greater than their daily routines. The American flag covering the casket seemed to glow in the morning light, its red, white, and blue fabric crisp and perfectly arranged. Jake stepped forward, his posture straight, and his expression solemn. He had practiced this ceremony hundreds of times, but each execution carried the weight of real loss and genuine grief. The paperwork in his hand contained the official orders for the transfer, but the true authority for his actions came from something much deeper than military protocol. Sarah Chen made her way down to the tarmac, her usual administrative concerns set aside for this moment. She had learned long ago that these transfers required more than just operational efficiency. They demanded the kind of human dignity and respect that transcended job descriptions and company policies. The cargo lift began its slow descent, carrying the casket toward the waiting transport vehicle. Jake maintained his position, ready to receive the fallen soldier and continue the journey home. Around him, airport workers paused in their duties, removing their caps and standing in quiet acknowledgement of the sacrifice being honored. Nobody could have predicted what was about to unfold. The routine transfer that should have taken 20 minutes would soon become something that challenged protocol, tested resolve, and ultimately revealed the true meaning of honor and duty. Jake Williams, standing proud in his dress uniform, had no idea that his next decision would create ripples far beyond the confines of Dallas International Airport. The first sign of trouble came from an unexpected source. As Jake stepped forward to receive the casket, Airport Security Chief David Morrison approached with quick, determined steps. His face carried the stern expression of a man accustomed to enforcing rules without exception. "Sergeant Williams, I need to speak with you immediately," Morrison called out, his voice cutting through the respectful quiet that had settled over the tarmac. Other workers looked up, sensing tension in the air. Jake paused, maintaining his formal posture while turning to address the security chief. "Yes, sir, what can I do for you?" Morrison held a clipboard in his hands, his knuckles white from gripping it too tightly. "I'm afraid there's been a complication with the transfer. We've received word that proper documentation hasn't been filed according to our new security protocols. The casket cannot be moved until we resolve this issue." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. He had handled every piece of paperwork exactly as he had done dozens of times before. His documentation was complete, his orders were clear, and his authority was unquestionable. Yet here stood an airport official, suggesting that a fallen soldier's final journey home should be delayed over bureaucratic concerns. Captain Hayes, who had been supervising the cargo operations, stepped closer to the conversation. His veteran's instincts told him something was seriously wrong with this situation. "Chief Morrison, what specific documentation are you referring to?" Everything appeared to be in order when we reviewed the manifest this morning. Morrison shifted uncomfortably, avoiding direct eye contact with either military man. "The new Homeland Security requirements demand additional verification for all military transports. I don't make the rules, gentlemen, I just enforce them." Sarah Chen watched this exchange with growing concern. In her 5 years managing operations at this airport, she had never seen a military escort questioned or delayed. These transfers operated under federal jurisdiction, and local airport security typically deferred to military authority in such matters. Jake felt his jaw tighten as he processed Morrison's words. Behind him, the honor guards maintained their positions, but he could sense their confusion and growing anger. This wasn't just about paperwork. This was about respect for a soldier who had given his life in service to his country. "Chief Morrison," Jake said carefully, his voice controlled but firm, "I have my official orders, the transfer documentation, and full military authority for this operation. Staff Sergeant Torres deserves to reach his family without delay." Morrison's response surprised everyone present. "I understand your position, Sergeant, but airport policy supersedes military convenience. The casket stays put until we receive proper clearance from our security office." The silence that followed was deafening. Ground crew members stopped their work entirely, sensing that something unprecedented was unfolding. Even the constant background noise of airport operations seemed to fade as this confrontation developed. Jake looked at the flag-draped casket, then back at Morrison. His mind raced through options and protocols, but every solution seemed to involve compromising the dignity of this moment or accepting an unacceptable delay. The family was expecting to meet the transport vehicle in less than 2 hours. They had already endured 3 weeks of planning and preparation for their son's final homecoming. Captain Hayes stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of 3 decades in aviation. "Chief Morrison, I've been involved in military transfers since before you were born. This is highly irregular, and I suspect there may be some misunderstanding about jurisdiction here." Morrison's face reddened slightly, but he maintained his position. "Captain, I respect your experience, but I have my orders just like everyone else. The security protocols are non-negotiable." Sarah Chen approached the group, her administrator's instincts telling her this situation was about to escalate beyond anyone's control. She had seen enough confrontations to recognize when personalities and policies were about to clash in ways that could damage everyone involved. "Gentlemen," she said softly, "perhaps we could resolve this in my office while we keep the transfer process moving forward. Surely we can find a way to honor both security requirements and military protocol." But Morrison shook his head firmly. "The casket doesn't move until I receive proper documentation. That's final." Jake felt something shift inside him at those words. He had spent 15 years following orders, respecting authority, and working within systems. But standing here on this tarmac, looking at a fallen soldier's casket while an official demanded additional paperwork, something fundamental changed in his perspective. The honor guards behind him sensed the tension escalating. These were experienced military personnel who understood chain of command and proper procedure, but they also understood honor and duty. They watched their escort commander carefully, ready to follow his lead regardless of where it might take them. Airport workers gathered at a respectful distance, instinctively understanding they were witnessing something significant. The normal rhythm of operations had been disrupted by this confrontation, and everyone present felt the weight of the moment. Jake Williams stood at a crossroads that would define not just his career but his character. The decision he was about to make would ripple through the airport, the military, and ultimately touch the lives of a grieving family who simply wanted to bring their son home with dignity. Jake Williams took a deep breath and made a decision that would change everything. He stepped closer to Morrison, his voice steady but carrying an unmistakable edge of determination. "Chief Morrison, with all due respect, this soldier is coming with me. Today. Now." Morrison's face flushed red as he realized his authority was being directly challenged. "Sergeant Williams, if you attempt to move that casket without proper clearance, I'll have airport security detain you and your entire detail. Don't test me on this." The threat hung in the air like a challenge. Jake felt the eyes of every person on the tarmac watching him, waiting to see how he would respond. Behind him, the honor guards shifted slightly, their hands moving unconsciously toward their weapons. The situation was rapidly approaching a point of no return, but Jake Williams had faced enemy fire in 2 combat deployments. He had lost brothers in arms and held dying soldiers in his arms. A bureaucrat with a clipboard and a power complex didn't intimidate him. What concerned him was the larger principle at stake. "Chief Morrison," Jake said, his voice carrying across the tarmac with military precision, "I want you to look at that casket. Really look at it. Inside is a 24-year-old soldier who died defending the freedom that allows you to have this job. His parents are waiting at the terminal. His wife is bringing their 2-year-old daughter to say goodbye to Daddy. And you want to delay that because of paperwork?" Morrison's resolve wavered slightly, but his pride kept him locked in position. "I don't make policy, Sergeant. I just follow it. Rules exist for everyone, including the military." Sarah Chen watched this confrontation with growing alarm. She had seen enough workplace conflicts to recognize when a situation was about to explode. Beyond anyone's ability to control it, she also recognized that both men were operating from positions they believed were right, which made resolution even more difficult. Captain Hayes moved closer to Jake, speaking in a low voice meant only for him. "Sergeant, think carefully about your next move. Morrison's an idiot, but he does have authority here. Are you prepared for the consequences of what you're considering?" Jake nodded slowly, never taking his eyes off Morrison. "Captain, I've been preparing for this moment my entire career. Some things matter more than consequences." The honor guards behind Jake straightened their postures, understanding without words that their commander was about to take a stand that would require their absolute loyalty. These were professional soldiers who had sworn oaths to follow orders, but they had also sworn to honor their fallen comrades. The conflict between competing duties was about to be resolved by their trust in Jake Williams. Morrison seemed to sense that he was losing control of the situation. He raised his radio to call for additional security backup, but Jake's next words stopped him cold. "Chief Morrison, before you make that call, I want you to understand something. I've escorted 17 fallen soldiers home during my career. I've stood with their families as they buried their children, their husbands, their fathers. I've folded flags and handed them to widows who will never see their husbands again. And in every single one of those ceremonies, I've made a promise that these heroes would receive the honor and dignity they deserve." Jake stepped forward, closing the distance between himself and Morrison until they were face to face. "Today you're asking me to break that promise. You're asking me to look at a grieving family and tell them that their son's final journey home has been delayed because of a bureaucratic power struggle. I won't do it." The airport ground crew had completely stopped working. Baggage handlers, maintenance workers, and even pilots from other flights had gathered at respectful distances to watch this confrontation unfold. Word was spreading throughout the terminal that something extraordinary was happening on the tarmac. Morrison's hand trembled slightly as he held the radio. He could see the determination in Jake's eyes, and he was beginning to realize that this wasn't just about following procedures. This was about something much larger and more important than his authority as security chief. "Sergeant Williams," Morrison said, his voice less certain than before, "if you proceed without clearance, I'll have no choice but to report this incident. Your career could be over." Jake's response came without hesitation. "Chief Morrison, if standing up for a fallen soldier ends my career, then it's a career I'm proud to lose." The words echoed across the tarmac, carrying a weight that went far beyond their immediate meaning. Airport workers nodded their approval, even though they kept their distance. Captain Hayes felt a surge of pride in the young sergeant's courage. Sarah Chen realized she was witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. But Morrison wasn't finished. He raised his radio again, this time with more determination. All security units respond to Cargo Area 7 immediately. We have a situation requiring immediate attention. Jake heard the call and knew his next few minutes would determine not just his future, but the outcome of a much larger confrontation between duty and bureaucracy. He turned to his honor guards and gave them a look that communicated everything they needed to know. The battle lines were drawn, and everyone present understood that what happened next would test the true meaning of honor, duty, and respect for those who had made the ultimate sacrifice. The airport security vehicles arrived within minutes, their red and blue lights flashing against the morning sky. 6 security officers emerged, looking confused and uncertain about the situation they had been called to address. They could see the flag-draped casket, the military honor guard, and the obvious tension between Morrison and Jake Williams. Security Supervisor Linda Parker approached the scene with careful steps. She was a 20-year veteran of airport security who had worked with military personnel countless times. Something about this situation felt wrong to her experienced instincts. "Chief Morrison," Parker called out, "what exactly is the nature of this security threat?" Morrison straightened his shoulders, trying to project authority he wasn't entirely feeling anymore. "Supervisor Parker, we have military personnel attempting to transport cargo without proper documentation clearance. I need you to detain them until this matter is resolved." Parker looked at Jake Williams, noting his dress uniform, his military bearing, and the obvious care with which he was handling this situation. She had been present for military transfers before, and everything about this escort operation appeared completely normal and professional. "Sergeant Williams," Parker said respectfully, "may I see your transfer orders and documentation?" Jake handed over his paperwork without hesitation. Parker reviewed it carefully, noting the official seals, the proper signatures, and the clear authorization for the transfer. Everything appeared to be completely in order according to standard military protocol. "Chief Morrison," Parker said after completing her review, "this documentation appears to be complete and proper. What specific security concern are you addressing?" Morrison's face reddened further. He was beginning to realize that his position was becoming increasingly difficult to defend, but his pride prevented him from backing down gracefully. "The new Homeland Security protocols require additional verification that hasn't been completed." Parker frowned, consulting her own security manual. "Sir, I'm not aware of any new protocols that would affect standard military transfers. These operations fall under federal jurisdiction and typically don't require additional airport clearance." The other security officers exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the situation they found themselves in. They were being asked to detain military personnel who appeared to be conducting a completely legitimate and legal operation. Meanwhile, word of the confrontation had spread throughout the airport. Terminal passengers were pressing against windows to see what was happening on the tarmac. Airport employees were gathering in break rooms and service areas, following updates on their radios and cell phones. In the terminal, Maria Torres sat with her 2-year-old daughter Elena, waiting for the arrival of her husband's casket. She had no idea that his final journey home was being delayed by a bureaucratic confrontation. Her parents-in-law sat beside her, their faces etched with grief and exhaustion from 3 weeks of funeral planning and emotional preparation. Jake Williams could feel the weight of all these people depending on him. The family waiting upstairs, the honor guard standing behind him, the airport workers who had stopped their duties to witness this moment, and ultimately the memory of Staff Sergeant Michael Torres, whose service and sacrifice deserved better than this. "Supervisor Parker," Jake said calmly, "I want to make something clear to everyone present. I'm not defying legitimate authority or proper procedure. I'm fulfilling my sworn duty to escort this fallen soldier home to his family, with the honor and dignity he deserves. If Chief Morrison wants to prevent that from happening, he'll have to explain his reasoning to a grieving widow and 2 small children." Parker found herself in an impossible position. Her training told her to support her superior's authority, but her experience and judgment told her that Morrison was wrong. She had worked enough military transfers to know that this was exactly how these operations were supposed to proceed. Captain Hayes stepped forward, adding his voice to the conversation. Supervisor Parker, I've been flying for 35 years and I've never seen a legitimate military escort operation questioned like this. Something is seriously wrong with this situation. Sarah Chen had been watching from a distance, but she finally decided to intervene. As operations manager, she had authority that rivaled Morrison's, and she had seen enough to know that this confrontation was damaging everyone involved. "Chief Morrison," Sarah said as she approached the group, "I need to speak with you privately, immediately." Morrison looked at Sarah with surprise and irritation. "This is a security matter, Sarah. It doesn't concern airport operations." Sarah's voice carried a steel edge that surprised everyone who heard it. "David, everything that happens on this tarmac concerns airport operations. And right now, we have a situation that's about to become a public relations nightmare for this airport and everyone involved." She gestured toward the terminal windows where dozens of passengers were watching the confrontation unfold. "We have travelers recording this with their phones. We have news crews that monitor our radio frequencies. And we have a military family upstairs who are waiting for their son to come home. How do you think this is going to look when it hits social media and the evening news?" Morrison's confidence began to crack as he realized the larger implications of his actions. He had been so focused on asserting his authority that he hadn't considered how this confrontation might appear to the outside world. Jake Williams sensed the shift in momentum. He could see doubt creeping into Morrison's expression, and he knew this was the moment to make his final stand. What he said next would either resolve this situation or escalate it beyond anyone's ability to control. The honor guard stood ready. The security officers waited for clear direction, and everyone present held their breath as Jake Williams prepared to make his move. Jake Williams made his decision with the clarity that comes only from absolute moral certainty. He turned away from Morrison and addressed his honor guards with quiet authority. "Gentlemen, we're proceeding with the transfer. Staff Sergeant Torres is going home today." The honor guards responded immediately, moving into position around the casket with practiced precision. Their movements were smooth and respectful, but there was an unmistakable determination in their actions that communicated they would not be stopped. Morrison's voice rose in panic and anger. "Sergeant Williams, I'm ordering you to halt this operation immediately. Security, arrest these men." But Supervisor Parker stood frozen, her years of experience telling her that arresting military personnel conducting a legitimate escort operation would be a career-ending mistake. The other security officers looked to her for guidance, clearly reluctant to escalate this situation into a physical confrontation. "Chief Morrison," Parker said carefully, "I need clear justification for detaining federal military personnel conducting operations under proper authorization. What specific law or regulation are they violating?" Morrison sputtered, unable to provide a coherent answer. His authority was crumbling as everyone present began to realize that his position had no legal foundation. Jake stepped forward, his voice carrying across the tarmac with unmistakable authority. "I want everyone here to understand something. Staff Sergeant Michael Torres volunteered to serve his country. He deployed to Afghanistan knowing the risks. He died performing his duty, protecting the freedom that allows all of us to live safely in our homes." Jake gestured toward the casket, his voice growing stronger with each word. "This young man left behind a wife and 2 small children. His parents are upstairs in that terminal, waiting to escort their son home for burial. They've already suffered more pain than any parent should have to bear, and now they're being asked to wait longer because of a bureaucratic power struggle." The airport workers gathered around the scene began nodding their agreement. Several removed their caps in respect, creating a moment of profound dignity amid the chaos of the confrontation. Captain Hayes moved to stand beside Jake, his pilot's uniform adding visual weight to the moment. "Chief Morrison, I've served in 2 wars and I've buried too many good soldiers. This young sergeant is doing exactly what needs to be done, and I'm proud to support him." Sarah Chen approached Morrison with determination written across her face. "David, I'm suspending this security action pending a full review. As operations manager, I'm authorizing the military transfer to proceed immediately." Morrison's face went white as he realized his authority was being challenged from multiple directions. "Sarah, you don't have the authority to override security decisions." Sarah's response surprised everyone with its firmness. "David, watch me." She turned to address Jake directly. "Sergeant Williams, you have my full authorization to proceed with this transfer. I'll take personal responsibility for any consequences." Jake nodded his thanks, then addressed his honor guards. Gentlemen, let's bring Staff Sergeant Torres home. The honor guards began the careful process of transferring the casket to the waiting transport vehicle. Their movements were precise and respectful, each action performed with the solemnity appropriate for their fallen comrade. Morrison made one final attempt to assert his authority. I'm calling the police. This is theft of government property. Supervisor Parker had heard enough. Chief Morrison, I suggest you step back and reconsider your position. You're about to make accusations against military personnel that you can't support with facts or law. The crowd of airport workers spontaneously began to applaud as the honor guards completed the transfer. The sound started quietly but grew in volume as more people joined in, creating a moment of genuine respect and appreciation for both the fallen soldier and the escort, who had refused to compromise his dignity. Jake Williams felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders as the casket was secured in the transport vehicle. He had made a choice that would likely have consequences for his career, but he had also kept his promise to a fallen soldier and his family. Morrison retreated toward the terminal, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. He knew that his handling of the situation would be reviewed and questioned, and he was beginning to realize that his position might not survive the scrutiny. Captain Hayes approached Jake as the transfer neared completion. Sergeant, that was the most courageous thing I've seen in 30 years of aviation. Whatever happens next, you did the right thing. Jake nodded his appreciation, but his mind was already focused on the next phase of his mission. Captain, we need to get to the terminal. The family is waiting, and they've waited long enough. As the transport vehicle began moving toward the terminal, airport workers lined the route, standing at attention in an impromptu honor corridor. Maintenance crews, baggage handlers, and service personnel put aside their daily duties to pay their respects to a soldier they had never met, but whose sacrifice they now understood. The confrontation was over, but its consequences were just beginning. Jake Williams had chosen honor over convenience, duty over bureaucracy, and courage over compliance. The ripple effects of his decision would soon reach far beyond Dallas International Airport, touching lives and inspiring others in ways he could never have imagined. The terminal fell silent as Jake Williams and his honor guards entered with the flag-draped casket. Travelers who had been rushing to catch flights stopped to witness the solemn procession. Children asked their parents whispered questions about the soldiers in dress uniforms, and adults explained the meaning of what they were seeing. Maria Torres rose from her seat as she saw the escort approaching. Her 2-year-old daughter Elena clung to her grandmother's hand, sensing the importance of the moment without understanding its meaning. Michael's parents, Robert and Carmen Torres, stood with the dignity of people who had raised a son to serve others before himself. Jake approached the family with the bearing of a professional soldier, but his eyes reflected the personal connection he felt to their loss. Mrs. Torres, Mr. and Mrs. Torres, I'm Master Sergeant Jake Williams. I had the honor of escorting your son and husband home. Maria Torres nodded, tears streaming down her face. Thank you for bringing him home, Sergeant Williams. Michael spoke about you in his letters. He said you were a man who understood what honor really meant. The words hit Jake harder than any of the confrontations he had faced that morning. This young soldier had written about him to his family, had trusted him enough to mention him in letters home. The responsibility he felt was overwhelming, but it was also a profound honor. Robert Torres, Michael's father, stepped forward and extended his hand. Sergeant Williams, my son chose to serve because he believed in something bigger than himself. Today you proved that his belief was justified. Jake shook the older man's hand, noting the firm grip and the steady gaze that reminded him so much of the fallen soldier. Sir, your son was a credit to his uniform and his country. It was my privilege to serve alongside him. As the family prepared to board their connecting flight, airport personnel gathered to pay their respects. Sarah Chen approached with several members of her operations team, their usual efficiency replaced by genuine reverence for the moment. Mrs. Torres, Sarah said softly, on behalf of everyone at Dallas International Airport, please accept our deepest condolences for your loss. Your husband was a hero, and we're honored that we could play a small part in bringing him home. Even some of the security officers who had responded to Morrison's call approached to offer their respects. Supervisor Parker spoke for her team when she addressed the family. We want you to know that your son's service meant something to all of us. Sergeant Williams made sure he received the honor he deserved. The boarding process for the connecting flight was handled with unusual care and attention. The airline crew, led by Captain Hayes, ensured that every detail was managed with respect and dignity. Other passengers waited patiently, understanding that they were witnessing something that transcended normal travel routines. As the family boarded the aircraft for the final leg of their journey home, Jake Williams stood at attention with his honor guards, rendering a final salute to their fallen comrade. The gesture was captured by several passengers with their phones, and the image would later spread across social media as a symbol of military honor and dedication. Chief Morrison had disappeared from the scene, reportedly meeting with airport administrators to discuss the morning's events. Word spread quickly through airport staff that his handling of the situation was being reviewed at the highest levels of management. Captain Hayes approached Jake as the aircraft prepared for departure. "Sergeant, I want you to know that I've filed a complete report about this morning's events. Your actions were completely professional and appropriate. If anyone questions your decisions, they'll have to go through me first." Jake appreciated the support, but he was already thinking about the potential consequences of his actions. Military careers could be ended by confrontations with civilian authority, even when the military personnel were completely in the right. He had chosen to do what he believed was correct, and he was prepared to accept whatever followed. Sarah Chen had one final conversation with Jake before he departed the airport. "Sergeant Williams, I want you to know that our airport management will be conducting a full review of this morning's events. What you did today was exactly what should have happened, and I'll make sure that's reflected in our official report." 3 days later, Jake Williams received a call from his commanding officer, requesting his presence for a meeting about the airport incident. He dressed in his service uniform and prepared for what might be a career-ending conversation. Instead, he found himself in a room with his colonel, a representative from the Pentagon, and a reporter from Military Times magazine. The story of his confrontation at Dallas International Airport had reached the highest levels of military leadership, and the response was not what he had expected. "Sergeant Williams," his colonel began, "your actions at Dallas International Airport have been reviewed by the Department of Defense. We want you to know that you handled an impossible situation with exactly the kind of courage and integrity that defines the best of our military." The Pentagon representative added, "Your dedication to honoring a fallen soldier, even in the face of bureaucratic obstacles, exemplifies the values we expect from our escort personnel. You've set a standard that will be used in training future Honor Guard members." 6 months later, Jake Williams was promoted to first sergeant and assigned to oversee the military's escort training program. His experience at Dallas International Airport became a case study in how to balance military duty with civilian authority, while never compromising the honor owed to fallen soldiers. Chief Morrison was reassigned to a different position within the airport authority, and new protocols were established to ensure that military escort operations would never again face unnecessary bureaucratic interference. The story spread far beyond Dallas, inspiring other military personnel and civilians alike to understand that some principles are worth defending regardless of the personal cost. Jake Williams had proven that true honor isn't just about following orders, but about having the courage to do what's right when the situation demands it. Staff Sergeant Michael Torres was laid to rest with full military honors in his hometown, surrounded by family, friends, and community members who understood the significance of his sacrifice. His escort's determination to bring him home with dignity had become part of his legacy, ensuring that his service would be remembered not just for how he died, but for how he was honored in death.